and I have another list here, and it does involve the offense, not Ben Johnson, not Mr. BJ, but it does talk about the offensive line. And we know this offensive line is elite. It's their best unit, I think, on the entire team, point blank period. And check this ranking out. I don't know if you have the graphic or not.
I'll find it.
But I'll read off where you guys think they rank. And this is per just to get the source correct here. This is per Warren Sharp Football, and they ranked the best offensive lines in the NFL, and this is on sharpfootballanalyst.com. And this is all an opinion piece, but still, I want to get the live reactions because we think they're 2. Some would have them 3, but they're a top 3 offensive line. And number 1, I think definitively, at least I would say, it is the Eagles. I think they have the best offensive line. I'm not going to try to make that case. I think you could try, but the Eagles, man, you got some Hall of Famers already on that on that line. So it's tough to argue that.
I mean, they literally could have the GOAT center and the GOAT right tackle right now still playing well, still being first-team All-Pro last year. No question it's got to be the Philadelphia Eagles at number 1. No question.
And no one has an issue with that, right? Eagles offensive line number 1. Cool. Okay. And then number 2 in this ranking, they have the Lions offensive line at number 2. And I'll just go through a couple who they have behind the Lions. 3, the Ravens, who do have a pretty good offensive line. 4, the Chiefs, which I actually think should be 3. Personally, the Chiefs' offensive line, since that Tampa Bay Super Bowl to now, their offensive line, they got dudes. 5, the Browns, which no disagreement there. 6, the Packers. 7, Broncos. And there you go. There's the top 7. There's a lot more. It's all 32. I don't give a damn. Let's just talk about the Lions. Number 2 on this list. Anyone think they should be higher? We'll start there. Is it fair? And people feel free to chime into the chat. Is number 2 fair? Okay, so I see Denver Blair 2 is rightfully so. And again, at least for the upcoming season, they have to re-sign Jonah Jackson next offseason. And again, Penei Sewell's so young, he could still get a lot better. The biggest question I have with this offensive line and my concern is Frank Ragnow's inoperable toe injury. And I guess the question would be, how concerned are you that this offensive line can stay healthy? Because look at the Jekyll and Hyde, right? Dan's first season, Frank Ragnow's hurt. Look what happened. It changed a lot of what the offensive line. Jared Goff was, compared to that year to the following year, sacked way more and was pressured way more because there was no Vitae still at that season to some extent. And then you had no Frank Ragnow. Now, the following season, you get Frank Ragnow back. He's healthy, banged up, but he played through it. Now Jared Goff barely gets touched. So I would argue that a lot of what the Lions do this year depends on the health of that offensive line. And I've been consistent with that. Yeah. We talked about the biggest concern for the Lions. They talked about outside wide receivers. I mean, you can't even throw your receivers if you don't have a damn healthy offensive line. So I would make that argument, the offensive line, the health of those guys up front, the most important thing for this offense to stay afloat. Your opinion on that?
Well, that's why... Here's my opinion on it. I think the Lions have the ceiling of being the number 2 offensive line in the NFL. I think right now, when I looked at this whole list, I personally would put them at number 5 behind the Eagles, of course, the Chiefs, the Browns, and the Atlanta Falcons. Those are the 4 that I would have ahead of the Lions right now. But at the same time, the Lions certainly have the ceiling to be the number 2 offensive line in the NFL.
I'm trying to figure this out. Don't worry.
It's all right. I'll just keep going. For those of you
look at Jeff's pretty face.
For those of you listening on the podcast, you have no idea what's going on anyway right now. So that is 100% perfect. I mean, Penei Sewell, I think we all agree that there is a chance that he becomes an all-pro very, very soon. He probably has the highest upside of any of the offensive linemen. I don't think he's quite reached it yet, but he could reach it this year. And then you look at Frank Ragnow. You obviously alluded to it. He has that inoperable toe. He's trying to play through it. He's been an all-pro. Do I think he can get back to that? Maybe, but it's still pretty much a logjam, I think, right now with like Jason Kelsey and Creed Humphrey and the like of that. But still, Frank Ragnow is going to be very, very solid. Vitae, I think, is one of the wild cards because he didn't play at all last year. If he can come back healthy, this can most certainly be a top 2 offensive line. Decker and Jonah Jackson, I think sometimes they get a little bit overvalued by Lions fans. I think they're both solid, not stars. I don't think Jonah Jackson kind of made a courtesy Pro Bowl in 2020. Taylor Decker, believe it or not, has never made one.
Well, hold on.
Wait. Did T.J. Hawkinson made a courtesy Pro Bowl too?
Well, would you say T.J. Hawkinson's pretty good?
T.J. Hawkinson is pretty good. I'm not saying that they're Jeff, I'm not saying that Jonah Jackson and Taylor Decker aren't good. I'm saying that they are good. They're solid. They're not stars. The stars, the potential superstar is Penei Sewell. The star who has proven something is Frank Ragnow.
I would, I guess I just view if you're, I would say Jonah's a top 10 guard, probably upper half of that top 10. So he's good. Like, I don't know, maybe the way you said it, it's just like, yeah, he's all right. No, he's really good. He's one of the better guards in the league.
He's fine.
He's good. He's not just fine.
He's good.
Fine.
Oh my
Jonah
goodness.
Jackson. Okay, go on. Continue.
He's good. I guess my point is that I think it would take a healthy Vitae, Penei Sewell taking yet another leap, Frank Ragnow playing a whole season healthy and playing at Pro Bowl level, and for Taylor Decker and Jonah Jackson to be healthy and continue to be stalwart, very solid to very, very good offensive linemen. If all of those things hit, which is very, very possible, the Lions, without a shadow of a doubt, have the second best offensive line in the NFL. I just don't think they are there quite yet, but I still have them as top 5, and it is their strongest unit.
What do you think, Lucas? You worried Frank Ragnow, inoperable toe injury?
I don't know. For this season, not that much, but that's definitely going to turn into a problem because when you're that big of a man, and you have 300-pound defensive linemen for the rest of your career just pushing against you, and they're going to be stepping on the toe, he's going to hurt that again. And I think eventually it's going to be one of those things where, as painful it is, we're eventually going to have to move on from Frank Ragnow. But that doesn't worry me at all because the rest of this offensive line, even if we keep 3 out of the 5, 2 out of the 5, we're still in good shape because this offensive line is built very well, especially with depth, I think. Like, if something happens to Ragnow, we got Glasgow. So I'm not that worried about it, especially with the running backs that we have. Even if this line does take a dip, we improved at the running back position. So I think it'll even out either way.
Well, at least you look at who they have currently. Vitae, whether he's good or not, they had Evan Brown last year. He was solid. They just need somebody at that really at that right guard spot that's just solid.
Yeah, and it's so easy to replace a guard in the NFL. It's like the running back position.
Especially if you have a Jonah Jackson, who I believe is a top 10 guard.
Yeah.
So you already have a top, 10, 15 tackle in Taylor, top 10 guard in Jonah, one of the better centers in the NFL in Frank. Vitae, I would say he's just solid. And then Penei, who's one of the better right tackles in the league. That's a great unit. But Frank Ragnow's injury, Broder, is a lot of concern there. I don't know. He has played through it, but inoperable toe injury, 17-game season, and 18 games, maybe 19 games. Some fans think it'll be 20 games.
Yeah.
They'll be playing in February, according to you, Broder.
I think you'd be a fool not to be a little bit concerned. Playing the center position, I think other than maybe wide receiver that relies so much on cutting and planting in the ground and getting in a different direction, the center uses all his leverage and gets all his power from his toes up. So literally, if you're starting, your first point of contact with the ground is a toe injury. That's
he's in pain
difficult.
like every play.
Yeah, that's
essentially
not so good. And I agree with Lucas a little bit about right guards are relatively easily replaceable, except for in an offense like the Lions that relies on play action, that relies on guards pulling so often. I think having a healthy Vitae is as important as anything on the offensive line.
Yeah, I mean, Frank Ragnow's no Sam Laporta, though. I just want to bring that up, Lucas. He's great, but he's not Hall of Fame.
I don't think Frank Ragnow's going to be a Hall of Famer. Now, if he didn't have this toe thing, I agree, but his career is definitely going to be shortened due to this. There's no doubt in it.
Should he just pull a Deion Sanders and just cut that thing off, or what? Deion, I feel bad for. Speaking of toe injuries, toe injuries are a huge deal, actually, because especially when they're inoperable, there's no more, and I'm not a doctor, but it's like there's no more tissue left for the doctors to do anything. It's essentially, hey, it is what it is.
Yeah.
They're going to have to shoot him up with all kinds of shots and medicine and just to get him through games. Now, he's tough as nails. Frank Ragnow is one of those guys that you look at and never shows he's in pain. He just plays. And I love it, but also I don't love it for his personal life. So I don't know how long Frank's career is going to be. But to say you're not worried about Frank this upcoming season, you'd be lying.
Well, I think we all agree that Frank Ragnow is going to try to play through it. He's going to tough it out, as one would say. But is Frank Ragnow, what % of his peak apex Frank Ragnow is he going to be able to be with this toe injury? Because if he's 100% Frank Ragnow and he were to do that for 3 or 4 years, I agree with Lucas. He would probably be a future Hall of Fame center. But with this inoperable toe, you could potentially see his career being shortened. Him not being who he once was this year. And I would say 80% or 80 to 90% of Frank Ragnow is still one of the better centers in the NFL. But it ain't as good as 100% of Frank Ragnow, because Frank Ragnow was one time in a second team All-Pro. And if everything is equal, if everything is everybody's healthy, you could argue that Frank Ragnow at this moment is the best overall and most valuable overall player on this team. So out of all the players to have an inoperable toe, especially given the fact that you're a center and dealing with defensive linemen on every single play, as Lucas said, it is something to at least watch for. It's not something that you can scoff at as nothing. You may see him out there and playing well, but you're always going to know that is not quite the Frank Ragnow that he was in his absolute apex.
Which, it's crazy. Even with the toe injury, he's still elite,
sure,
which is crazy to think about. Booner, just to get some of these comments, shout out to Booner, shout out to Michael Gentry, Kool-Aid as well. The love we're getting from Woodward Sports employees, man. Appreciate you guys for tuning in. But Booner says, Frank can have one of my toes. I don't need it. Hey, Booner. He's a real one right there, donating his toe. Jonah says Frank Ragnow is the type of guy to rip off his own toe and bite it and get back in the game. I mean, that's okay? All right, if that's who we have, we're fine. Let's see. Philip says, Jeff, donate one of your toes to Frank Ragnow. Well, Patty, excuse me, says donate one of your toes for the team. Maybe we can work out something. Maybe we can work out some sort of deal. You can have my toe, Frank. You guys win a Super Bowl. I get taken care of. We'll talk about the details at a later date. And I think the other thing is too, for at least this offensive line compared to last year, and what they've added is depth, which is a huge part of it. Vitai's back healthy. I know they lost Evan Brown, but you signed Glasgow as well. So at least you have some depth, and Glasgow can play center. He can play guard. He can play any position on the offensive line.
Big Colby.
You just hope you don't get to that point where Glasgow is playing center. He can play right guard if Vitai's hurt, but you'd much rather have Frank in there. Because, again, Jared spoke about it. Without Frank, it's very different.
Earlier this summer, I had the chance to speak with Frank and had the opportunity to ask him about his foot and what was going to happen and how he was feeling about his toe. And he had a very positive disposition about it. It was early in the summer, and there was still not training yet, but he said, look, like I'm healing, I'm doing what I can. There's really no other options aside from that and healing and working with what he's got. But his disposition was really positive about it, and he seemed very hopeful for a full season.